Hey y'all, good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about a case for Susan Meister. She was born June 15th, 1948 and died June 25th, 1971. Rest in peace, Susan Meister. May your memory always be shared. I wanted to, first off, before we get to Susan, I want to play you a little clip of Natalie and a lovely lady named Deanna that was talking about where we're going to talk about with Susan Meister. And let me play this clip for you. It's only 44 seconds long, but it kind of gives us a preview of where we want to go.
So we had been up for I don't know, it was like 48 hours, and my area was secure. So I went to bed. Well, evidently that was the wrong thing to do. And I got taken out and put in the chain locker for being asleep.
So two grown men grab you, a teenage girl,
I was kicking and fighting and screaming all the way. Yeah.
kicking and screaming and fighting them. Did you know where they were taking you?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And did they tell you? How did you know?
Yes. It was two masters of arms, and they just said, "Come with me," and it was just like, "Oh no, you don't." Yeah, I don't. I don't recall who. There were two men. So we had been up for I don't know, it was like 48 hours, and my area was secure. So I went to bed. Well, evidently that was the wrong thing to do. And I got taken out and put in the chain locker for being asleep.
So two grown men grab you, a teenage girl,
I was kicking and fighting and screaming all the way. Yeah.
kicking and screaming and fighting them. Did you know where they were taking you?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And did they tell you? How did you know?
Yes. It was two masters of arms, and they just said, "Come with me," and it was just like,
They could have
"Oh no,
listened
you
to that
don't."
twice, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't. I don't recall who. There were two men.
So Deanna Ross was talking about the Scientology ship and how she was basically thrown in the hole on the Scientology ship, detained, unlawful detainment against her because she wasn't acting appropriately. Well, this beautiful woman, Susan Meister, I'm going to read a few articles that we have, and I'm going to link all of this below. Susan, this is for your memory here, darling. This is for your memory. Susan Meister was introduced to Scientology in San Francisco in the autumn of 1970. By November, she was working at the San Francisco org. She was an eager convert and tried to persuade her parents to become Scientologists. She wanted to be close to the founder and contribute to clearing the planet. So in February 1971, she joined the Sea Org. By the end of the month, she was aboard the flagship Apollo. Her stay there was brief and tragic. On May 8th, she wrote to her mother, "Mother, do you recall talking to me about World War III and where it would start if it were to start? Father and most everyone else maintained that it would start in either China or Russia versus US, and you said, oh no, it would originate in Germany, that the Nazis hadn't given up yet. Well, babe, you were right. There is a new Nazi resurgence taking place in Germany, so now it's a race between the good guys and the white hats, Scientologists, and the Leipzig death camp, the Nazis. The bad guys in the black hats will win, of course, but the game is exciting. Truth is stranger than fiction, as Alice in Wonderland says. Things get curiouser and curiouser. Get into Scientology now. It's fantastic." 4 days later, Susan Meister wrote this letter. Dear family, just had a wonderful, I'll have to read it to you on the other one because this one is, dear family, I just had a session in auditing, an auditing session. I feel great, great, great. And my life is expanding, expanding. And it's all Scientology. Hurry up, hurry, hurry. Be a friend to yourselves. Get into this stuff now. It's more precious than gold. It's the best thing that's ever, ever, ever come along. Love, Susan. Her last letter to her parents from the Apollo was dated June 1971. In it, she thanked them for her birthday card and a variety of gifts, including a new dress. She continued, showing the effect upon a young and impressionable mind Hubbard's obsession with the great conspiracy against him. I can't tell you exactly where we are. We have enemies who are profiting from people's ignorance and lack of self-determinism, and do not wish to see us succeed in restoring freedom and self-determinism to this planet's people. If these people were to find out where we are located, they would attempt to destroy us. Therefore, we are not allowed to say where this ship is located. She once more urged her mother to read Hubbard's books and take Scientology courses. 10 days after writing the letter, Susan was dead. George Meister, Susan's father, was away from his Colorado home on a business trip when the Guardian's office public relations man, Artie Maren, phoned. George Meister met Maren the next day and was presented with an unsigned fact sheet, giving the Scientologist's account of events as a series of numbered statements. Meister told Artie Maren that he wanted the body to be flown back to the U.S. for burial. Meister received a letter from Bob Thomas at the Church of Scientology in Los Angeles explaining that Panamanian owners of the Apollo were not obliged to give information to the Church of Scientology. However, the Apollo's captain, Norman Starkey, had offered to pay for a Christian burial in Morocco, but regretted that they would not pay for the body to be returned to the United States. George Meister, dazed by the news, decided to go to Morocco to try and verify the circumstances of his daughter's death. He was told he would be able to see the body in the morgue in Safi. He left for Morocco on July 14th. Meister was met at the airport in Casablanca by Sea Org member Peter Warren, who escorted him to the Marhaba Hotel. Meister met U.S. Vice Consul Jack Galbraith and explained the purpose of his mission. During the meeting with Galbraith, Warren phoned to say he would drive Meister the 120 miles to Sale. Warren said the Apollo was already past its scheduled departure date, but would wait a little longer because of Meister's presence. Meister arranged to leave the following morning at 6 a.m., accompanied by Galbraith, Warren, and a Sea Org girl called Joni. Their first stop in Sale was the police station. Meister said the police official he spoke to genuinely tried to help. He showed Meister a photograph taken aboard the Apollo showing the dead girl. Rest in peace. According to her father, Susan was lying on the bunk wearing the new dress her mother had made for her, her arms crossed with a long-barreled revolver on her breast. A bullet hole was in the center of her trigger warning here, you guys. A bullet hole was in the center of her forehead and blood was running out the corners of her mouth. I began to wonder how Susan could possibly shoot herself in the center of her forehead with that long-barreled revolver. She would have had to hold it with both hands at arm's length. There was no powder burns on her forehead, which certainly would have been the case if the gun was against her forehead, as would have to be to shoot herself as the photograph appeared. The police said the revolver was not available for inspection. Meister was shown the police report, but it was in French, which neither he nor Galbraith spoke. Meister was told that the police were unwilling to release copies of either the report or their photographs. Meister and Galbraith went on to the hospital, where Susan's body had been taken. During the autopsy, her intestines and her brains were removed. Meister said that when Warren admitted that he had given permission, believing that Susan might have been on drugs, Meister asked to see the body, which he had been told was in the refrigerated morgue. To his amazement, he was told by a doctor that they did not know where the body was. The next day, with Warren and Joni still in attendance, they had an audience with the Pasha of Safi. The Pasha told Meister he could not have copies of the police report or the photographs. He said he had transferred the records to the provincial capital, Marrakesh. When Meister pressed him to find the whereabouts of Susan's body, the Pasha told him the interview was over. Meister asked Warren if he could see Ron Hubbard. He knew that Hubbard's daughter, Diana, was about Susan's age, in Meister's own words. Passing the guarded gates into the port compound, we had our first look at Hubbard's ship Apollo. It appeared to be old, and as we boarded it, the girls manning the deck gave us a hand salute. All were dressed in work-type clothing of civilian origin. Most appeared to be young. Upon boarding, we were shown the stern of the ship, which was used as a reading room with several people sitting in chairs reading books. The mention of Susan seemed to meet disapproval from those on board. We were shown where Susan's quarters were in the stern of the ship. Below decks, where it appeared 50 or so people were sleeping on shelf-type bunks. Susan's letter had mentioned she had shared a cabin all the way forward with one other person. Next, we were shown the cabin next to the pilot house on the bridge, where the alleged suicide had taken place. It was a small cabin and appeared to be one where a duty officer might catch some sleep while underway. We were not allowed to see any more of the ship. I requested an interview with Hubbard, as he was then on board. Warren said he would ask. He returned about half an hour later and said Hubbard had declined to see me. Meister and Galbraith returned to Casablanca. Meister found that the 30 or so films he had been carrying with him had disappeared, including the film he had shot of Sail and the Apollo. In his words, as I was preparing to leave the hotel to take the flight home, the telephone in my room rang. It was Warren, who said he had to see me at once on the matter of utmost urgency. I told him I would see him in the lobby. Warren came into the lobby, a very frightened man. His face was pale, and he motioned me to a chair in the corner of the lobby. He told me he was sent to make a settlement with me in cash. Meister was outraged by this suggestion, and he told Warren to deal with his attorney. At the airport, just prior to boarding, I was accosted by a large man in a pinstripe suit, carrying a briefcase. He said, "We are watching you, and so are the CIA and the FBI." After his return to the U.S., Meister found that his daughter had been buried in a Casablanca cemetery, wrapped in a burlap sack. Before his visit to Morocco, he arranged to have the body exhumed and shipped to the U.S. in a sealed tin coffin. His local health authority in Colorado received an anonymous letter before the body was returned. It said in part, "There has been a cholera epidemic in Morocco. There have been recorded 200 to 300 deaths, and it's been brought to my attention that the daughter of one George Meister died in Morocco, either by accident or from cholera. Probably the latter." The Los Angeles Times picked up the story. According to November 11, 1971 letter from Assistant Secretary of State David M. Absher to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Apollo's port captain threatened in the presence of the American Vice Consul from Casablanca, William J. Galbraith, that he had enough material, including compromising photographs of Miss Meister, to smear Mr. Meister. Meister is said to have left Morocco the day before the threat was made. That's so wild. The Scientologists then launched a campaign against Galbraith with little success. For example, telling the newspapermen that he had threatened the CIA, that the CIA would sink the Apollo. Meister received anonymous letters saying that his daughter had made pornographic films. What a disgusting, disgusting thing. And that she had been a drug addict. Meister said he continued to be harassed for 6 years. The harassment stopped around the time of the FBI raids on the Guardian's office in the summer of 1977. How do you smear a girl's name like that? If Susan Meister did commit suicide, several questions remain. She had been aboard the Apollo for 4 months. During that time, she sent consistently enthusiastic letters to her parents. To commit suicide, she must have undergone a very rapid mood change. She must have also lost her faith in the efficacy of Scientology. If this was so, what had caused this sudden shift of opinion? And why didn't she leave the Apollo? Letters were censored before leaving the Apollo, and the passports of those aboard were held by the ethics office. So perhaps she was unable to write the truth of what she had discovered, and unable to leave the ship, perhaps. There is no concrete evidence to show that Susan Meister's death was not a suicide, but the whole affair is compounded by the events which followed. By creating the Sea Org and taking to the sea, Hubbard has successfully put himself beyond the law. There was no coroner's investigation into death, and it is likely that the verdict, at least of foul play, would have been returned if there had been a sudden investigation. I'm going to read the footnote. Scientology said Susan was a suicide. Article by George Meister. George Meister testimony, Clearwater Hearings, May 1982. Letter to the author from George Meister, 13th of June, 1986. These are additional resources. Also, Urquhart interview, correspondence with Amos Jessup. So that's one. And then we have another, the underground bunker. I'm not going to read through this one. It does go by quite a few. But here's a picture of the Apollo. It does look pretty old. Looks kind of spooky and haunted, if you ask me. And I guess the deaths were on the same day between Susan Meister and Kendrick Moxon's daughter. That's kind of eerie. I'll kind of poke through it here. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about. So Hubbard liked Safi because he was quiet. It was quiet, off the beaten path. The locals were friendly and seemed to enjoy our visits. However, another devastating event occurred when a crew member, Susan Meister, based upon all reports and police investigation, committed suicide on June 25, 1971. Sue was a new Scientologist and had not had a lot of auditing or training when she arrived on the Apollo, nor did she have many female friends. She kept mostly to herself or had an occasional boyfriend. While on the Apollo, she began a relationship with one of the ship's officers, which included moving into his cabin behind the chart room on the bridge deck. There were 4 cabins on the bridge deck. Directly below, on the prom deck, were the engineers' quarters consisting of 7 cabins. She was familiar with the engineers' quarters, including where her snipe ex-boyfriend hid his guns. That's got to be sniper ex-boyfriend hid his guns and ammunition, which he kept in 2 different locations. Unbeknownst to anyone, Sue was suicidal. Yeah, I'm not going to finish reading that. You guys can go. I'll leave a link below to this heresy. When Mr. Meister was allowed back to the Apollo for security purposes, he was not shown his daughter's suicide note on the back of the HCO policy letter. Again, I'll finish scrolling through this. You guys can slow it down. So Janice Gilliam Grady, Janice, was on the ship at the time, and she referred to an officer who found the door to his cabin locked, and after he retrieved the key, he found Sue Meister inside. We spoke to that officer, whose account matches what Janice wrote in her book. He assured us that he, as well as the rest of the crew, was questioned multiple times by officials from multiple agencies, and the accounts were all the same. He assured us that this was an unfortunate suicide, and he understood that people who weren't there will speculate about it. But those who were there, he said, knew that Meister was an unhappy person who ended her life. And it was something, he told us, that George, Sue's father, later came to accept, according to later conversation he had with him. Yeah, I don't believe that whatsoever. And let's talk about some of the crimes, allegedly. So in those crimes, allegedly, I'm going to go back to Susan Meister's. We have covering up a crime. We have impeding an investigation, obstruction of justice, possible murder. That's all allegedly. And we have several people that I'll name that is part of this, L. Ron Hubbard being one of them. Yeah, definitely rest in peace, Susan Meister. And I'm not too sure if George is still around, but I hope that he finally got some closure for his mind. And for all those that were around and near, all that had to witness this. What a horrific crime. So until the next one, if we have more information or if anybody would like to add to this, please email me and let me know at the Scientology Crimes channel. Thank you and have a wonderful day.